I'm Jane Madej and welcome to the video. Today we're going to learn about a technique that you can use with water-based markers to make them have a watercolor effect. I'm going to be using the Art Journal of Calligraph markers as well as some other assorted markers. This is my journal page that I did in my Art Journal of Pipa journal. You can see that there, and I'm going to show you how I get some of these effects. So let's move this out of the way. I've drawn a couple of the elements on another sheet of paper, and let's get in a little bit closer there so that you can see that. And what I'm going to be using, this is what is called a blending palette, and it came with a box of Art Journal of acrylograph pens. But you can also use any plain plastic palette, the kind of thing that people use for stamping or ink blending, things like that. What we are going to do is we are going to use our markers as if they're watercolors by coloring a blob of color there on the palette. And then with your paintbrush, you can pick that up just as if it's regular watercolor. And I find this really convenient if I'm going to be traveling with my journal, because it's a lot easier to take a handful of markers and a paintbrush with you than it is to take a whole watercolor set. So I'm going to add a bit more color here to my blending palette, so I've got plenty there. And I'll show you what we do. I'm just going to start painting on the cat like this. And you can see it looks just like watercolor paint. See, let's fill him in. His name is Marmalade. He shows up in a lot of my drawings and journal pages. Get that all filled in. Like that. Now, one thing I should mention about using watercolor markers like this, water-based markers, is that most pens are not archival. So you are going to want to use this in a journal that stays closed, that doesn't get a lot of light on it, but you wouldn't want to do this with a drawing that you wanted to hang on the wall, for example, where a lot of light would shine on it, because they will fade. So let's add a little shading. Got a little bit more color on the brush. See how you can just blend that out? This is just the same blotch of color that I painted on there before. Color his ears. Get some nice blending going. Color down there. And across his back. And I like to blend it with a little clean water on the brush, just like this. And we'll do a little bit on his legs and going down the bottom of his tail. Now we're going to let this part dry before we go to the next step on the cat. And I'll show you the technique that I like to use on the lettering. So I'm just going to color my lettering in the normal way with a pen here. Here we go. You can probably hear my dog walking around. He always hangs out with me here in the studio. I'll just be lucky if he doesn't bump my arm while I'm trying to draw or shake the camera. So there we go. Now what we're going to do is add shadows. I think it's really important to add a shadow under your elements on the page because that helps anchor them to the page, it helps ground them, and it helps them stand out. Do you see the difference there? When we add the shading, it really makes the element have more depth. And when you're doing this, you need to figure out which direction your light source is coming from. So all your shadows are going to face the same way. So in this case, my light source is coming from the left, so all my shadows are going to be on the right. Now we are going to, I've got another color here. This color is called Bluebell. I'm going to color this onto my palette a little bit here. Get some of that. All these colors are from the Calligraph Jewel Tone selection. So let's see. And now what I like to do is just make the bottoms of the letters just a little bit darker. I think that is another way that helps add interest and depth to the page. And there we go. Okay, let's see, how dry is that cat? He's getting there. We're gonna get another pen. This one is Dusty Rose. Color in his nose and his ears. Let's just give it a quick blast with a dryer. Get him really dry. The thing with using water-based markers like watercolors is if you go into an area that's wet, it is going to bleed and feather and the lines will look fuzzy. So on your pens, they have two tips. They've got a brush tip on one side and a fine tip on the other side. And now we're going to use the fine tip to draw the stripes on the cat. So what we do is we're going to draw the lines like this, and I'm going to make the lines taper a little bit. To make them taper, what you do is you lift your pen, slightly at the end of each stroke, and that makes it get lighter and narrower toward the end. So here we go. And I try and make my lines go in the direction of fur growth. Not because this is a realistic drawing, it isn't, it's just a doodle, but you want the taper to be at the end of the stroke. So there we go, like that, and that's got all his stripes. So that shows you a technique that I like to do, several techniques, and I hope you enjoy trying them, and I hope to see you again next time. Thanks a lot.